The room was dimly lit, casting soft shadows against the walls, creating an intimate and peaceful atmosphere. Outside, the world continued its constant rush, but inside, everything seemed to slow down. The clock ticked quietly, its hands moving ever so slightly, as if respecting the stillness that had taken over the room. On the bed she lay there, her body nestled into the soft sheets, her face illuminated by the gentle glow of the bedside lamp. Her hair, a cascade of dark waves, spread out across the pillow like a silky veil. She was the picture of serenity, an image of calmness that made everything around her fade into insignificance. There was something magical about how she looked in that moment, as if the world outside didn't exist, and the only thing that mattered was the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. I watched her, my gaze soft and filled with affection. It had been a long, exhausting day. But the moment I walked into the room, all the fatigue seemed to disappear. It was as though the sight of her in that simple, unguarded moment made everything else seem trivial. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone was enough to make my heart beat a little faster. The bed seemed to embrace her, wrapping her in warmth and comfort, like a sanctuary she could retreat to after the world had demanded too much. She had always had this effect on me, the way she could turn something as mundane as a bed into a place of beauty. There was nothing extravagant about her. Yet everything about her felt incredibly precious. Every gesture, every smile, every quiet moment, they all added up to something extraordinary. I approached her slowly, hesitant not to disturb the peace that enveloped her. She was still, almost as if she had been suspended in time. I knew she was asleep, but there was something about the way she lay there, with the light catching the contours of her face, that made her seem more alive than anything else in the room. I sat down on the edge of the bed, watching her for a moment longer. Her lips were slightly parted, her expression soft, as though lost in a dream. The familiar comfort of her presence settled over me, and I let out a long, slow breath, feeling my body relax for the first time all day. I couldn't help but smile at the sight of her. There was a purity to her, a sweetness that made everything seem brighter when she was near. I had known her for a while now, but it still amazed me how she could capture my attention so effortlessly. Even in the quietest moments, she commanded my focus, drawing me in with a warmth that radiated from her very being. Her hand rested loosely by her side, fingers curled slightly, a small sign of her vulnerability. She wasn't pretending to be anything other than who she was. It was this honesty, this unguardedness, that I found so incredibly captivating. She didn't need to perform or put on an act to be beautiful. She simply was. And it wasn't just her physical appearance that drew me to her. It was the way she made me feel, like I had finally found something I had been searching for all my life. As I sat there, watching her sleep so peacefully, I couldn't help but reflect on how we had gotten here. The path we had walked together hadn't always been easy. We had both come from different worlds, brought together by fate in a way that neither of us could have predicted. There had been moments of doubt, of struggle, of fear. But there had also been moments of joy, of laughter, and most importantly, love. Love. It seemed like such a simple word, but when it was true, it held so much weight. And what I felt for her was deeper than anything I had ever known. It wasn't just the passion or the chemistry, though that was certainly a part of it. It was more than that. It was the quiet moments, the shared glances, the feeling of being understood without having to say a word. I leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face gently. She stirred slightly but didn't wake up, her breathing deepening as she settled back into the dream world. I smiled again, my heart swelling with tenderness. I loved this side of her, the side that was so soft and vulnerable, so completely herself. The room, with its soft lighting and the rhythmic sound of her breath, felt like a world of its own. It was as though we were the only two people in existence, and the outside world could wait. In this moment there was no rush, no need to go anywhere or do anything. All that mattered was the peacefulness of being together, in this simple, unspoken connection. I reached down, gently taking her hand in mine. Her fingers were warm, and as I held them I could feel the trust between us, the bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. It wasn't always easy, and there were times when we had to work through the difficulties life threw our way, but in the quiet moments like this, all of that faded. It was just the two of us, existing in perfect harmony. I lay down next to her, careful not to disturb her too much. She shifted slightly, nestling closer to me, her body naturally seeking the warmth and security that only I could provide. I closed my eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling the rise and fall of her chest beside me. And in that moment, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, for her, for us, for everything we had been through together. On the bed, she was adorable. In every way, she was perfect. And in this moment, I realized that no matter what happened in the world, as long as we had each other, everything would be all right. The morning light streamed through the curtains, gently warming the room. It was a quiet, peaceful morning, and the world outside had just begun to wake up. I could hear the distant hum of the city, but inside, everything felt suspended in time. The soft sound of her breathing, still steady and deep, was the only thing that anchored me to the present. She shifted beside me, the faint rustle of sheets breaking the stillness. I opened my eyes slowly, adjusting to the soft light, and looked at her. There she was, still asleep, her face relaxed and innocent. The way she looked in the morning was different from how she looked at night. At night, there was a quiet strength to her, a sense of mystery. But in the morning, she seemed more vulnerable, more delicate. Her lashes fluttered slightly, and I noticed how her lips curved ever so slightly into a peaceful smile. I couldn't help but admire her, even in her sleep. There was something about the way she carried herself, so effortlessly, so gracefully. Her beauty wasn't the kind that screamed for attention. It was the kind that stayed with you, lingering in the background of your thoughts long after you had left her side. She was the type of person who could walk into a room and, without saying a word, make everything feel just a little bit more meaningful. I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, and she sighed softly, turning toward me instinctively. It was as if her body knew that I was there, that I was the one who would protect her, who would always be there when she needed me. It was a feeling I had grown accustomed to, that sense of being needed, of being wanted. But it was more than that. It was a feeling of belonging, of being part of something bigger than myself. I gently placed my arm around her, pulling her closer to me. Her warmth enveloped me, and for a moment, I simply lay there, holding her, listening to the sound of her breathing, and feeling the steady rhythm of her heart against mine. There was something so comforting about these quiet mornings, the simplicity of them. No rush, no deadlines. Just the two of us together, existing in our own little world. I couldn't imagine a life without her. The thought of it was unimaginable. When we had first met, I hadn't known that I would feel this way. I hadn't known that she would become such an integral part of my world. It had started so simply, just two people crossing paths, not knowing that their lives would soon be intertwined in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. But now, it seemed impossible to think of a future that didn't include her by my side. She shifted again, this time waking up fully. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, she seemed disoriented, as if the world outside of the bed was too far away for her to reach. But then she looked at me, her expression softening, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. It was a smile that never failed to make my heart race. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice still husky from sleep. It was a sound that I had come to cherish, a sound that carried warmth and comfort. "Morning," I replied, brushing a gentle kiss across her forehead. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the gesture, and I couldn't help but smile. There was something about these mornings, the quiet, tender moments we shared, that made everything feel so right. It wasn't the grand gestures or the big, life-changing moments that defined our relationship. It was the small, everyday things. The way she always knew when I needed space, and the way I could always tell when she needed reassurance. We had learned each other's rhythms, understood each other's needs without ever having to ask. She snuggled closer, resting her head against my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her tighter, holding her close. The feeling of her against me was so comforting, so natural. It felt like we were made for this, for these moments of peace, of quiet connection. The world could be chaotic, but in her arms I felt like I could handle anything. We didn't speak for a few minutes, just lying there, wrapped in the silence. It was a comfortable silence, one that didn't need to be filled with words. We were perfectly content just being together. "I've been thinking," she said suddenly, breaking the stillness, "about everything we've been through." I raised an eyebrow, wondering where she was going with this. "What do you mean? Just us," she said, her voice soft but serious. "How we started out so uncertain, so unsure of each other. And now—" She paused as if searching for the right words. "Now it feels like we're meant to be." I smiled at her words, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. She was right, in a way. When we had first met, there had been so much uncertainty, so much fear of the unknown. But we had built something together, something strong. We had learned to trust each other, to open up in ways we hadn't before. It had taken time, and there had been moments when we doubted ourselves, but now it felt right. "Yeah," I said, brushing my hand through her hair. "It does feel like that, doesn't it? Like everything has led to this." She nodded, her eyes searching mine for confirmation. "I don't want to go back to how it was before. I want to keep going forward with you." The sincerity in her words struck me deeply, and for a moment I was speechless. I had never felt more sure of anything in my life. "I feel the same," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't want to go back either. I want this. I want us." Her smile deepened at that, and I could see the relief and happiness in her eyes. "Then we'll make it work, together." And in that moment, I realized that she was more than just the girl on the bed, more than the girl I had fallen in love with. She was my partner, my equal, the one I would choose again and again. No matter what came our way, I knew that as long as we had each other, we could face anything. The morning sun had begun its climb higher in the sky, casting a golden hue across the room. The quiet hum of the world outside was almost inaudible, muffled by the thick walls and heavy curtains. The air smelled faintly of coffee, a reminder that the day had just begun. But for now, it felt like time had paused. In this small, intimate corner of the world, it was just the two of us, cocooned in our shared warmth, floating in a space where nothing could touch us. Her hand rested softly on my chest, her fingers gently curling and uncurling in rhythm with the steady beat of my heart. I could feel her steady breaths against my skin, a soft, almost imperceptible movement that calmed me. Every breath she took seemed to synchronize with mine, and I marveled at how naturally we fit together, like two puzzle pieces that had always belonged to each other, even before we knew it. I could tell she wasn't asleep anymore. Though her eyes remained closed, her face still turned toward me. She always had this way of absorbing everything around her, of taking in the moment and savoring it as if it was the most precious thing in the world. I loved that about her, how she could find beauty in even the simplest things. It wasn't just the grand gestures or the extravagant moments that captured her attention. It was the small, fleeting details. A hand brushing against hers, the way the sunlight streamed through the window at just the right angle, the sound of birds chirping in the distance. To her, everything had meaning, and it made me see the world in a way I never had before. I reached down and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, letting my fingers linger on the soft curve of her face. Her skin was warm under my touch, and she sighed softly, as if my simple gesture provided her with the comfort she hadn't known she needed. Slowly, she opened her eyes, the light grey of her irises clear and sharp, full of emotion but soft with affection. The look she gave me was something I had come to treasure, a quiet recognition, a silent promise. "How did I get so lucky?" she murmured, her voice still thick with sleep. though the words were filled with meaning. I couldn't tell if she was asking me or herself, but the way she spoke, so vulnerable and honest, made me feel both humbled and proud. I brushed my thumb gently over her cheek, feeling the softness of her skin, and I smiled. "You didn't get lucky," I replied, my voice steady but filled with warmth. "We both did. We found each other, and I'm never letting go." Her lips parted in a quiet gasp as if my words had reached some deeper place inside her, stirring emotions she hadn't expected to surface. She didn't say anything more, but she didn't need to. The way she looked at me, with those wide eyes full of love and trust, said everything. We were on the same page now, in a way that went beyond words. It was as if the universe had aligned, pushing us together in a beautiful collision that neither of us had seen coming. I couldn't deny that our relationship hadn't always been smooth sailing. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of both of us wondering if we were really ready for the kind of commitment we had entered into. But we had worked through it, slowly, step by step, allowing ourselves to grow individually and together. Every fight, every disagreement, had only brought us closer in the end. And now, there was no question, no lingering uncertainty. We were in this together. She sat up slowly, drawing the blanket with her as she looked out the window, her expression thoughtful. I watched her, taking in the way the light caught the delicate features of her face, how her hair fell softly around her shoulders. She was still in her pajamas, her appearance unkempt, yet in that moment she had never looked more beautiful. There was an effortless charm to her, an authenticity that shone through even in the quietest moments. I propped myself up on my elbow, watching her carefully. "What's on your mind?" I asked, my voice a little softer now, aware that she might be processing something. She didn't speak at first, her gaze fixed on the outside world, as if the answers she sought were hidden somewhere in the vastness of the sky. I didn't rush her. I had learned over time that sometimes silence was the best thing you could offer. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was thinking about the future, about everything we've been through, and how we got here. We've been through a lot, haven't we?" Her words were quiet, but there was a weight to them, as though she was searching for something solid to hold on to in the uncertainty of life. "We have," I agreed, my voice low. "But look where we are now. We've made it this far together, and that means something." I reached out, placing my hand on hers, interlacing our fingers as if to ground both of us in the present moment. She turned to face me, her gaze intense but soft. "I don't want to go through life without you," she said, the vulnerability in her voice pulling at my heartstrings. There was no hesitation in her words, no doubt. She spoke with the certainty of someone who had seen the world, who had experienced the pain and joy life had to offer, and had chosen time and time again to stay. I leaned forward, brushing a gentle kiss against her forehead, holding her gaze as I did. "You won't have to," I whispered against her skin. "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." She closed her eyes at the feeling of my lips on her skin, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. We simply existed in the shared space of our love, in the safety of our connection. The world outside may have been changing, shifting, full of unknowns and challenges, but here, in this room, there was only certainty. There was only us. Her hand tightened around mine, and she rested her head on my shoulder, her body leaning into mine. The comfort of her touch, the way she trusted me without question, made everything feel so right. It wasn't about grand declarations or sweeping gestures. It was in these small, quiet moments that I found the deepest connection. I glanced down at her, watching her chest rise and fall gently with each breath she took, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over me. I had been lucky enough to find someone who saw me for who I truly was and accepted me, flaws and all. And in return, I had learned to love her in ways I hadn't known I was capable of. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in a world full of fleeting moments, that was all that really mattered. The days seemed to blur together, one moment slipping into the next as we navigated the rhythms of life. The morning light had become a familiar companion, and the warmth of her presence in the bed beside me felt like the anchor I needed to stay grounded in a world that often felt chaotic. But as we continued to settle into this shared space, this new phase of our relationship, something had started to shift. There were moments, small but undeniable, where I found myself reflecting more deeply on the connection we had forged. What was it about us that felt so unshakable? And why did the world outside seem to pale in comparison to the life we were building together? I had always believed that love, true love, wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about always agreeing, or never experiencing doubts, or pretending that everything was always right. Love was about the messy, unpredictable, yet beautiful journey that two people embarked on together. It was about learning, growing, and sometimes falling, only to pick each other up and keep moving forward. But in the quiet moments when the world was still, I found myself contemplating the deeper truths of our bond. What made us so strong? Was it the fact that we had come from different worlds and yet somehow found common ground? Or was it the vulnerability we had both learned to embrace? She had taught me in so many ways how to be softer, how to open up, and I had shown her, in my own quiet way, that trust wasn't something to fear, it was something to hold on to. Together, we had begun to rebuild pieces of ourselves we hadn't even realized had been broken. I watched her one morning, her back to me as she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. She'd always had this way of drawing my attention, even when she wasn't trying to. The simple, everyday things she did, the way she moved, the grace with which she held herself, left me in awe. She was beautiful, of course, but there was so much more to her. There was strength in her gentleness, wisdom in her laughter, and a quiet, undeniable fierceness in her love. "You know, you're beautiful," I said quietly from behind her, watching as she paused in the midst of brushing her hair. She met my gaze in the mirror, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I know," she replied, her voice teasing, yet affectionate, "but I think it's your eyes that are making me look good." Her playful words made me smile. But beneath the joking tone, I could see something else, a hint of insecurity, a shadow of doubt that she sometimes carried with her, despite all her outward confidence. I knew she didn't always see herself the way I saw her, but it was moments like this when she let her guard down just enough to show me the raw vulnerability beneath, that made me love her even more. I walked over to her, standing behind her now. Gently, I placed my hands on her shoulders, feeling the warmth of her skin under my palms. I leaned in close, my breath warm against her ear as I whispered, "You're more than beautiful. You're everything. Don't ever forget that." She turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror, and I could see the flicker of something. Gratitude, love, but also an unspoken understanding. "I won't," she said softly, "not as long as I have you." And in that moment, I realized just how deeply our lives had become intertwined. It wasn't just the little moments of tenderness that defined us. It was the way we had taught each other to see ourselves more clearly, to love ourselves more fiercely. She had opened my eyes to the parts of me I had hidden for so long, and I had done the same for her. I could see her more clearly now, not just as my partner, but as the person she had become, a beautiful, strong woman who had learned to embrace her imperfections and grow from them. And she saw me too, not as someone who was perfect, but as someone who was willing to grow and change with her. "We're going to make it, aren't we?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty, but more hopeful than before. I didn't hesitate. I took her hand, pulling her closer to me, and said, "We already have, and we will, as long as we're together." She looked up at me, her eyes shining with something I couldn't quite name, and for the first time I realized how much we had already weathered together. The challenges, the mistakes, the lessons learned, they had all led us to this moment, and I had never been more certain of anything in my life. "We've been through so much," she murmured, "and yet here we are, stronger." I nodded, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and love. "We've been through the fire, but we've come out the other side, together." There was something powerful about those words. about the realization that we had made it this far. And in the quiet, shared moments we had, there was a recognition that we were stronger than we had ever been before. We had created something solid, something real. A foundation built not on fantasy, but on trust, on honesty, and on the belief that we could face anything as long as we faced it together. It wasn't always going to be easy. Life had a way of throwing unexpected curveballs. There would be days filled with doubt, moments of fear. But as long as we had each other, as long as we were willing to keep showing up for one another, I knew we would always find our way back. Together. Her hand squeezed mine as if she could feel the certainty I had in that moment. And in that brief, quiet exchange, everything fell into place. The past, the present, and the future. It was all part of the same journey. And we were on it together. The days after that morning seemed to move at a slower pace. Time, in a sense, had taken on a different meaning when we were together. The world outside was chaotic, with the demands of work, family, and obligations constantly tugging at our attention. But within the walls of our little world, we had managed to carve out something precious, a space where only the two of us existed, where nothing else mattered except for the quiet moments we shared. I noticed how we had begun to settle into a rhythm, one that felt natural and unspoken. There was a sense of ease between us, a comfortable silence that spoke volumes. We didn't need to fill every moment with words or distractions. We could simply be in each other's presence, and that was enough. In the evenings, after a long day of work, we would sit together on the couch, the soft hum of the television filling the background, but neither of us paying it much attention. It was during these moments that I realized how deeply our connection had grown. We didn't have to try to make things perfect. It was in the imperfection that we found beauty. A messy living room, dirty dishes waiting to be washed, a half-drunk cup of coffee sitting on the table, none of it mattered. What mattered was the fact that we were together, in the same space, sharing this life. One evening, as I sat on the couch with her, my head resting on her shoulder, I felt a shift in the air. A quiet tension that hadn't been there before, something unspoken but undeniable. It wasn't a bad feeling, but it was different. She had grown quiet, her fingers tracing absent circles on my hand, and I could sense that something was on her mind. I could feel her hesitate, as though she was trying to decide whether or not to speak. But the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar, almost as if we were waiting for the right moment. I turned my head slightly, looking at her, waiting for her to make the first move. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but filled with meaning. "Do you ever think about the future? What's next for us?" Her words hung in the air between us, and I could sense the weight of them. There was a vulnerability in her question, a desire for certainty in a world that often felt uncertain. I turned fully toward her, my hand resting on hers, and I met her gaze. Her eyes were wide and open, searching mine for an answer. For a moment I didn't speak. Instead, I let the silence stretch, allowing myself to process what she had said. I thought about our future, about the path we were walking, and the life we were building. Of course, I had thought about the future. How could I not? Every moment I spent with her felt like it was laying the foundation for something lasting. We had already faced so much together. Our past, with its own set of challenges, had only served to strengthen us. But now, in the quiet comfort of our shared space, the future seemed both thrilling and terrifying at the same time. "I think about it all the time," I said finally, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "About where we're going, what we're building. I think about all the things I want to do with you, all the places I want to go. I want to experience everything with you." Her eyes softened, and I saw the faintest glimmer of relief in her gaze. It was as though she had been carrying a question inside her for a while, and finally hearing me say the words she needed to hear put her mind at ease. "I want that too," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just don't know what it looks like yet. I don't know how we get there. What if we're not ready?" I took her hand in both of mine, holding it gently, but with a sense of purpose. I knew what she meant. The future was full of uncertainties, and there were moments when it felt daunting. The idea of building a life together, of fully committing to each other to all that came with it, was both exciting and intimidating. "We're already building it," I replied softly. "We're doing it right now, every single day. Every decision we make, every step we take, we're building something that's real. We're not waiting for the perfect moment. We're making it perfect with the choices we make, together." She looked at me, her expression softening as she processed my words. "So, you think we're ready? Ready for whatever comes next?" I didn't hesitate. "I don't know if we'll ever be fully ready, but I do know that whatever comes next, we'll face it together. And that's all we really need, isn't it?" She nodded, a small but genuine smile curling at the edges of her lips. "Yeah, I think you're right. We'll make it work, together." The relief in her voice was palpable, and it mirrored my own sense of certainty. It wasn't about having everything figured out, about having a clear step-by-step plan for the future. It was about knowing that we had each other, that no matter where the journey took us, we would be side by side. As the evening wore on, we sat together in comfortable silence, the weight of our conversation lingering between us. It wasn't the kind of conversation that solved everything, but it was a conversation that brought us closer, that deepened our understanding of each other's hopes and fears. It was a reminder that we didn't have to have all the answers. What we had was enough: love, trust, and the willingness to walk forward, no matter where the path might lead. Later that night, as we climbed into bed, I felt a quiet sense of peace settle over me. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, and as she nestled against me, I realized that the future, with all its uncertainties, was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace, something to look forward to, because I knew that as long as we were together, everything would be okay. In the stillness of the night, I kissed the top of her head, whispering a promise that I knew we would both keep. "We're in this together, always." And as I drifted off to sleep, the sound of her breathing steady and calm against my chest, I felt a deep, unwavering certainty that no matter what the future held, it was a future worth facing. The weeks that followed felt like a delicate balance of routine and discovery. We had settled into a rhythm that was comfortable, but underneath it all, there was an unspoken understanding that the path ahead was still full of unknowns. Yet, with every day that passed, I grew more certain of one thing. The more we embraced the unpredictability of life, the more I realized just how deeply I had come to trust her, and how much I wanted to keep building our future together. There were moments when the weight of our connection hit me harder than others, when I found myself looking at her and feeling the sheer magnitude of what we had. It wasn't just about the love we shared, it was about how much we had already shared. Our dreams, our fears, our histories. It was in the way we could finish each other's sentences, in the quiet touch of her hand on my arm when words weren't enough, in the way we could talk for hours or sit together in silence and still feel connected. I had come to realize that these small, seemingly insignificant moments were the ones that made everything feel so right. One evening we sat out on the balcony, the fading light of the day painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The cool breeze brushed against our faces, and the world around us seemed to slow down. It was one of those rare moments when everything felt in place, as if time itself had decided to pause and give us a gift. I had always been someone who liked to overthink things, planning every detail, trying to control every aspect of my life. But with her, I had learned to embrace the uncertainty, to let go of the need to have everything figured out. It wasn't about having all the answers, it was about learning to trust the process, about accepting the fact that sometimes the most beautiful things in life were the ones we couldn't control. And I was slowly learning that with her, I didn't need to have it all planned. "Do you ever wonder what's next?" she asked, breaking the silence and pulling me from my thoughts. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant, and I could sense that she was thinking the same thing I was. The future. It had been a recurring thought in both of our minds recently, and I could tell that she, like me, was feeling the weight of the unknown. I turned toward her, meeting her gaze, and I smiled, all the time. But I think that's okay. I think for once, we don't need to know every detail. She raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk tugging at the corners of her lips. You're telling me that you're okay with not planning everything? I chuckled, the sound light and easy between us. Yeah, I guess I'm starting to get used to the idea. I mean, look at us. We've come so far already just by being present, right? Her eyes softened, and I could see the warmth in them. She nodded slowly, as if contemplating my words. I guess you're right. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. I've never really thought about it that way before. The way she said it made me realize how much we had taught each other in such a short time. We had both been so focused on what came next, on trying to anticipate the challenges ahead, that we had almost forgotten the beauty of the present moment. The truth was, we had everything we needed right here, right now. I was starting to understand that. It's funny, I said, my voice thoughtful, how we spend so much time worrying about the future when what we have now is so much more important. She tilted her head, considering my words, and then gave a small, knowing smile. Yeah, but that's life, isn't it? We get so caught up in what we think we need to do that we forget to enjoy the moments that are right in front of us. I'm glad I get to enjoy them with you, I said, my words coming out almost without thinking. The sincerity in my voice made me pause for a moment, but before I could second-guess myself, she reached out and took my hand, squeezing it gently. I'm glad too, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. The connection between us felt deeper than ever in that moment, as if all the struggles and the fears that we had both carried with us had somehow melted away. It wasn't about finding answers anymore. It was about finding peace with the uncertainty and knowing that, whatever came next, we would face it together. We sat there for a while, not speaking, just holding hands and watching as the last light of day faded from the sky. The sounds of the city below us seemed distant and muted, a reminder that everything outside of this moment was nothing compared to what we shared. The world could keep spinning on its axis, with its endless demands and pressures, but as long as we had each other, we would be okay. In the quiet of that evening, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had already taken together. From the first hesitant moments of getting to know one another, to the late-night conversations, to the way we had slowly, almost imperceptibly, woven our lives together step by step. Every moment, every memory, was a building block, a part of something greater that we were creating. And I realized that in a world full of chaos and confusion, what we had, was the only thing that truly mattered. I've never felt more sure about anything in my life, I said, my voice filled with certainty. Not about where we're going or what we're doing, but about us. We've got this. She turned to me, her eyes full of emotion, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. But the way she looked at me, so deeply, so meaningfully, said everything. In that silent exchange, I knew that we were on the same page. We were ready, not because we had figured everything out, but because we had each other, and that, in itself, was enough. As the night wore on and the stars began to appear in the sky, we sat together, the sound of our steady breathing mingling with the quiet hum of the world below. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to worry. There was nothing to prove, no questions left unanswered. The future didn't seem so daunting anymore. All that mattered was right here, right now, and the simple, unspoken promise that we had made to each other, that whatever came next, we would face it together. The days stretched into weeks, and with each passing moment, I began to understand just how much we had changed each other. There was a quiet magic in the way we had started to blend our worlds together, not in grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but in the quiet, everyday moments that held meaning far deeper than I had ever anticipated. Every morning, as we woke up beside each other, and every night, when we shared a quiet dinner or settled into bed, I felt as though we were building something that was both fragile and unbreakable at the same time. But despite the comfort and certainty that had grown between us, I knew that life in all its complexity would never stop testing us, It would never stop throwing challenges our way, ones that would force us to question ourselves, to reconsider our decisions, and to grow. And while that thought should have filled me with fear, it didn't, because now I knew we could face it all together. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, the kind of ordinary night that felt extraordinary simply because we were together, I noticed a change in her. It wasn't a dramatic shift, but rather a subtle change in her mood, a quiet distance that had settled between us. She wasn't talking as much, her eyes unfocused as she stared at the screen. I could tell something was on her mind, and instinctively, I knew it wasn't about anything external. It was something inside her. "Hey," I said softly, pausing the movie. "What's going on? You've been quiet tonight." She looked at me, her eyes meeting mine for a brief second before quickly looking away. "I'm fine," she said, but there was a hesitation in her voice that didn't sit right with me. I reached out, gently taking her hand in mine, guiding her to look at me again. "You don't have to pretend. I can tell something's bothering you." For a long moment she didn't say anything. I could feel her struggle, the conflict playing out behind her eyes. It wasn't easy for her to open up, and I knew that, despite the bond we had built, there were still parts of her that she kept guarded. But I had come to understand that about her. She wasn't closed off. It was just that sometimes she needed time to process things before she could share them. "I've just been thinking," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thinking about everything, about us, about where we're going. I don't want to mess this up, but sometimes I don't know if I'm enough, if I can be everything you need me to be." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could hear the vulnerability in her voice, the fear that she wasn't good enough, that somehow she would fall short. It broke my heart, but at the same time it made me realize just how much she truly cared. I squeezed her hand, gently guiding her to face me. "You don't have to be anything other than yourself," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "You don't need to be perfect, because you're already everything I need. I love you for who you are, not for some ideal version of you. And that's all I'll ever need." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine as if she were looking for the truth in my words. And when she saw it there, when she saw the sincerity that had always been there, her face softened. "I just get scared sometimes," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "Scared that I'll mess up, that I won't be able to give you everything you deserve." I could feel the weight of her fears, and it made me want to hold her even tighter, to shield her from all the doubts that seemed to cloud her mind. "We all have fears," I said softly, "but the difference is, we face them together. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep trying, keep showing up for each other, and that's enough." She let out a deep breath, the tension slowly leaving her body. Her fingers tightened around mine, and I could feel the subtle shift in her as she began to let go of the fear, just a little bit. "I'm so lucky to have you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose us." "You won't," I replied without hesitation. "As long as we keep talking, keep being honest, we'll be fine. You don't have to carry this on your own." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry for being so unsure. There's no need to apologize," I said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We're all a little unsure sometimes, but the fact that you're here, that we're here, says more than anything. We're in this together, and that's all that matters." For a moment we just sat there, holding each other's gaze. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was a quiet understanding, a shared moment of connection that didn't need to be filled with words. It was a reminder that sometimes all we needed was the assurance that we were seen, that our fears and doubts were acknowledged, but that they didn't define us. "I love you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I love you too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "More than you'll ever know." The rest of the evening passed in a comfortable silence, the movie forgotten as we curled up together on the couch. The world outside, with all its uncertainties and challenges, faded into the background. In that moment, it was just us. two people who had found something worth fighting for, and I knew, deep in my heart, that no matter what came next, we would face it as one. The weeks that followed were filled with a quiet kind of growth. We didn't need grand declarations or sweeping gestures to solidify our connection. Instead, it was the little things, the gestures of love in the midst of daily life, that seemed to strengthen the foundation of our relationship. A gentle touch on the arm when one of us passed by, an impromptu cup of coffee in the morning just because we knew the other needed it. Late-night talks that turned into early morning revelations. These moments, small as they seemed, were the glue that held us together, the quiet, steady rhythm of our lives intertwined. But beneath the surface of our calm existence, there was a growing sense of something else, something deeper and more profound, a knowing that we had reached a point where we had both fully committed to the journey ahead, and that the road wouldn't always be smooth. Life had a way of challenging even the strongest relationships, and it was clear to me that we weren't immune to those challenges. Yet, I was no longer afraid of them, because we were in this together. One evening, after a particularly exhausting week, we found ourselves sitting on the balcony once again. The sky had faded into a deep shade of navy, the stars beginning to prick through the dark fabric of the night. The world outside was hushed, as if it too were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. But we weren't waiting for anything. In this moment, everything felt perfectly in place, just as it was. I sat beside her, my arm draped casually around her shoulders as she leaned into me. We didn't speak at first, content to simply exist together in the stillness. But then, as the night deepened, I felt her shift beside me. Her fingers gently traced the outline of my hand, the movement slow and deliberate, as though she were contemplating something. I turned my head slightly to look at her, and when our eyes met, I saw the familiar hint of uncertainty that had been lingering in her gaze for a while. "Are you thinking about the future again?" I asked, my voice soft, though the question had been on my mind for days. She nodded slowly, her gaze not leaving mine. "Yeah, I can't help it, I want to make sure we're heading in the right direction. We've been so sure of each other, so sure of what we have, but what about everything else? What happens next?" I smiled, brushing a few loose strands of hair behind her ear, the gesture both tender and familiar. "We don't have to have it all figured out. We never will. That's the thing about life, it's unpredictable. But what I do know, without a doubt, is that as long as we're together, we'll figure it out. Together." Her eyes softened, and she let out a soft sigh, her shoulders relaxing. "You make it sound so simple, but it doesn't always feel simple, does it?" "No, it doesn't," I admitted, my voice full of understanding. "Life is messy, relationships are messy. There are days when everything feels uncertain, and there are moments when we question everything we've worked so hard for. But the key is that we face those moments together. That's what makes it worth it." She leaned into me more, her head resting on my shoulder as the night air brushed across our faces. We sat in that comfortable silence, letting the weight of the conversation settle between us. The future didn't seem so daunting anymore, not with her by my side. It was true that there were still questions, still things left unanswered, but I wasn't afraid of those unknowns, because I had faith in us. I had faith that whatever came next, we would face it as a team. "I cannot imagine a future without you," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "I don't know where it will take us, but I know I want you there with me." My heart swelled at her words, the sincerity in her voice wrapping around me like a warm blanket. I kissed the top of her head softly, the gesture simple but filled with all the love I felt for her. "I can't imagine a future without you either, and whatever it holds, I know it will be ours." We stayed like that for a while, letting the night unfold around us, the silence between us no longer filled with uncertainty, but with a quiet, shared understanding. The stars twinkled above, and for the first time in a long while I realized that this moment was enough. There was no rush, no need to figure everything out right away. We had time, and more than that, we had each other. That was all that mattered. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the future, not of the unknowns, because I knew that as long as we walked this path together, we would always find our way. As the evening wore on, we eventually headed inside, still quiet but comfortable in our shared space. We didn't need to say anything more. We had both said everything that mattered in those few words. The future would come, one day at a time, but for now, we had each other. And that was enough. Later, as we settled into bed, I pulled her close, holding her against me as she curled into my side. Her steady breathing calmed my racing thoughts, and I felt the gentle beat of her heart against mine. The world outside, with all its demands and uncertainties, faded into the background as I closed my eyes. The future was still waiting for us, just beyond the horizon. But for now, we were here, together, and that was more than enough. The days that followed felt like they held a different kind of energy, as if the foundation we had built was stronger than ever, and we were now ready to face whatever came next with a new perspective. There was a quiet certainty in both of us, a shared understanding that we had learned something important, that the future wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace, and together we could face it, whatever challenges or joys it might bring. The world continued to move around us, with its ever-present noise and constant demands. But inside our little sanctuary, it was as if time slowed down, and all that mattered was the space we created together. The comfort of our shared life, the small, seemingly insignificant moments, became the very things that made our relationship what it was. We still faced uncertainty, of course. Life didn't stop being unpredictable, and we didn't expect it to. There were days when the weight of responsibility threatened to pull us in different directions, when the stress of work or outside pressures tried to intrude on our peaceful existence. But through it all, we had learned how to lean on each other, how to support each other when life seemed too heavy. We didn't have to have everything figured out. What we had was each other, and that was enough. One afternoon, we decided to take a walk in the park just to clear our minds and enjoy the simple pleasure of each other's company. The autumn leaves had begun to change color, and the crisp air carried the earthy scent of the season. As we walked, side by side, we talked about everything and nothing at all. It was the kind of conversation that only felt right with her, where the words didn't need to be profound to carry meaning. It was enough just to be in each other's presence. At one point, as we passed under the canopy of trees, I looked over at her, watching the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves and danced across her face. She looked content, serene, as if in that moment the world had stopped spinning just for us. "You know," I said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never thought I could feel so sure about anything." She smiled up at me, her eyes warm and full of affection. "You feel sure about us?" I nodded, the weight of my words sinking in. "I do. I've never felt more sure about anything in my life. About us. About the future. Whatever happens, I know we'll be okay." Her smile widened, and she reached out to take my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine as we continued to walk. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice soft but filled with confidence. "I've never felt more at peace with where we are. We've come so far, and I know we'll continue to grow together." There was a pause, a moment of silence as we walked on, and I could feel the depth of her words. It was true. We had come a long way, and there was so much more ahead of us. We had built something real, something solid, and no matter where the road took us, we would always have this, each other, our shared understanding, and the quiet promise that we would face whatever came next as a team. As the afternoon began to fade into evening, we found ourselves sitting on a bench, the park now empty, except for a few scattered leaves drifting in the breeze. We didn't need to fill the space with words. The stillness between us was comfortable, familiar. It was in these moments, in the quietest parts of our day, that I felt the most connected to her. Not in the grand gestures, but in the simple act of sharing life. "I've been thinking," she said after a long pause, her voice thoughtful, almost wistful. about how much we've grown together, and how much more we still have ahead of us. I turned to look at her, my heart swelling with a quiet affection. And how much more we still have to learn, together. She nodded, and we both sat there in silence for a while, watching the sky shift from golden to dusky purple, the stars slowly emerging. The world around us was moving, but in that moment, we were standing still. Everything felt right. It wasn't about having all the answers, about knowing exactly what the future held. It was about knowing that we didn't have to figure it all out alone. We had each other, and that was enough. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I turned to her, brushing a stray lock of hair away from her face. She was already half asleep, her breathing steady and deep, but when I touched her, she stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice soft but filled with concern. She smiled faintly, her hand reaching out to rest on my chest. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. "I'm happy. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." I held her close, the warmth of her body against mine grounding me in a way I hadn't known was possible. In the stillness of the night, I realized just how far we had come. There had been uncertainty, yes, doubts, fears, and challenges that tested us along the way. But there had also been growth. Together, we had learned how to love, how to support each other, and how to build something real, something worth fighting for. As I closed my eyes, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. The world outside could be uncertain, and the future could still hold its challenges. But with her by my side, I knew I was ready for whatever came next, because we had something that was stronger than anything life could throw our way. We had each other, and that was enough.